Hey there, stranger. Remember me? I'm that stranger who stalks your sanity. And I'm here again with the 7th installment in the talks on the Great Recovery. And the title this time is The Rule of Thamus. Now, I take that title from a citation that I'm using, which comes from the dialogues of Plato, specifically from the Phaedrus, and the closing passage of that dialogue, which was written about, 25 centuries ago. My purpose in citing this ancient text is to alert you to the imperative responsibility in recovery to recover from the spell of IT and AGI, from what I call archontic intelligence, not artificial intelligence. There is no such thing as artificial or non-living intelligence. All intelligence is alive. And among the many conditions that we are recovering from, this one, I think you would agree, stands in the forefront. The spell of IT has become particularly strong over the last year or so. Why? Well, in December, or November, I think it was, of 2022, those nerdy technocratic wizards out there released open source AI. And this led to a tremendous escalation in the use of AI, the proliferation of certain tools such as chatbots, ChatGPT, NVIDIA, Midjourney, and accessories to AI which afford the world certain tools of simulation. And so there has been a tremendous escalation in the discussion around this technology and in the availability of these tools since open source AI was released in November of 2022. By the way, let me know how the sound quality is coming through in these talks. I had to change my sound system due to recording issues, and I just put that sponge type muffle on the microphone, which I believe prevents it from making that slight percussive noise at certain words. So let me set the scene for you before I read this passage, which is not long. The scene is rather special. Scholars of antiquity, and scholars particularly of the Platonic dialogues, will tell you that the Phaedrus is the only dialogue that Socrates has that occurs outside the city of Athens. So as the story goes, one day, he and his good friend, Phaedrus, decided to take a stroll. And this little meander took them out of town along the course of a small river, just a brook actually, called the Ilissos, or Lissos, that runs from Athens down to the port of Piraeus. So it's a unique setting. They were outside in nature. And as a matter of fact, the Phaedrus ends with the so-called prayer to Pan, the god of nature. So at the end of the dialogue, Socrates himself pronounces this beautiful prayer. Now I'm going to read the passage without commentary until after I've completed it. But I will add a little comment on the first line because it contains some significant clues to the meaning of the rule of thamus and how it applies to the view that you and I, in recovery, take toward IT and AGI technology. Socrates is about to recount an anecdote, and the first line begins like this: I heard that Atnocrates in Egypt was one of the ancient gods of that country, the one whose sacred bird is called the ibis, and the name of that god himself was Thoth. So I'm going to take a moment to comment on this line to contextualize the significance of what you can learn, what is to be learned from the rule of thamus. Socrates mentions Thoth or Toth, also known as Hermes or Hermes Trismegistus. So Thoth was the name of the Egyptian god of writing and codes. And he is said to have invented writing. How did he invent writing? Well, the Egyptian legend says that he was walking in nature along the banks of the Nile. He was walking in the sandy area and along close to the swampy regions at the border of the Nile. And he noticed the ibis bird among the wild creatures, among the fowls that inhabited the banks of the Nile. And he noticed that this stork-like, long-legged bird, when it walked, left certain imprints in the sand. And they were not always the same. They varied depending on the speed it was walking, depending on the wetness of the sand, the depth of the imprint, and depending on other factors like how it might turn direction. And he studied the ciphers of the feet of the ibis in the sand, and that inspired him to invent writing. Now, there's a great lesson in that little anecdote. The lesson says, or what does the lesson say? To me, it speaks very obviously. It says that humans invent technology based on the observation of nature. Now, there are other wonderful examples of that, parallel examples in world mythology. For instance, there is a Chinese folk hero called Fu He, and he is kind of a shaman, madman, a shaman sage that lives out in the wilds. And it is said that one day Fu He came upon a turtle, and he sat down and he looked at the back of the turtle, and he observed the patterns on the back of a turtle, of that turtle, which anyone can look at by pulling up an image of a turtle. And he contemplated those patterns, those natural living patterns of nature, just as Thoth contemplated the footprints of the ibis. And the Chinese legend says that from contemplating the marks and the geometrical design on the back of a tortoise, that Fu He invented the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. Now that is an advanced technology. The 64 hexagrams, consisting of combinations of 6 lines, is a high feat of technology. But once again, it derives from intimacy with nature and direct observation of nature, which, by the way, as you may have inferred by now, the technology of IT, informational technology, and AGI, artificial general intelligence, does not. It does not derive from observations of nature. It is a purely self-referential, arbitrary, computational code. It is an artificial code. It is not a living, nature-based code. This is one of the first points to be drawn from the story that brings us the rule of thamus. The ongoing argument about the pros and cons of technology, which I'm going to bring up after I read the passage, centers around the claim, in many cases, that artificial technology, AI, will equal and surpass human intelligence. But it can never do so, because human intelligence is part of the living design of nature. We have human intelligence due to being part of nature, being products of the living intelligence of the planet itself. And whatever codes and symbols, forms of writing, in forms of visual and textual description that we invent, such as mathematics, comes from the living intelligence and the observation of that living intelligence. AI does not. It cannot achieve agency. It cannot achieve appetency, which is to say, having appetite, desiring and wanting and tasting things and appreciating sensorial impressions, tastes, colors, whatever. It lacks common sense, and it even lacks moral sense. But I anticipate a little in that critique. I'll return to that after I read the complete passage. So here it comes. Socrates: I heard that Atnocrates in Egypt was one of the ancient gods of that country, the one whose sacred bird is called the ibis, and the name of the god himself was Thoth. He it was who invented numbers and arithmetic and geometry and astronomy, also drafts and dice and games to play, and most important of all, letters for writing. Now the king of all Egypt at that time was Thamus, who lived in Thebes, and they call him the embodiment of Amun. The story goes that Thamus said many things to Thoth in praise or blame of the various arts, all too long to repeat. But when it came to letters, Thoth said, "This invention, O king, will make the Egyptians wiser and will improve their memories, for it is an elixir of memory and wisdom that I have invented." But King Thamus, the Pharaoh Thutmoses, replied, "Most ingenious Thoth, one may have the ability to create such things as alphabets, but the ability to judge of their usefulness and harmfulness is another skill. And now enthusiasm leads you, the inventor of letters and codes, to ascribe to them a power the opposite of what they really possess. For this invention will produce forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it, because they will not practice their memory. Their trust in writing, produced by external characters which are not part of themselves, will discourage the use of their own innate power of memory. You have invented an elixir, not of memory, but of reminding. And you offer your pupils the appearance of wisdom, but not true wisdom. For they will read many things without instruction, and will therefore only seem to know many things, when they are, for the most part, ignorant and hard to get along with, since they are not wise, but only appear to be wise." End quote. Now, I don't know what you may make of that passage, but to me, personally, it is a brilliant piece of critical exposition. And whatever the takeaway is for you, I would advise you of that one single phrase. One may have the ability to create such things as alphabets, but the ability to judge of their usefulness or harmfulness is another skill. What does that tell you? This is the essence of the rule of Thamus. It's an extremely important guideline for recovering from the spell of artificial technology. Those who invent it, the engineers, the software code writers, and everyone who is on the inside of that technology are the least qualified to judge of its usefulness or harmfulness. There you have a brilliant boundary statement to criticize technology. You and I generally don't know how it's invented. We can't write code, and we don't know everything that goes into training large learning language models, whatever they're called, LMMs. And we do not know very much at all about how the technology is invented. Those who have invented it tell us about its usefulness or harmfulness. The great debate is on. But beware, exercise caution, draw a boundary. Be mindful that those who have invented this technology are the least qualified to know how to use it. They are the least qualified, less qualified than you and I, who know nothing about how it is invented, to say how it can be used for good or harm. So, remember that when you listen to them, if you ever do. There are two tendencies, or shall I say, two sides of the debate: the technophiles and the technophobes, the utopian and the dystopian views of IT. So you hear the hype coming from the inventors and the users of it, those who can profit financially from selling it to you. You hear the hype of the technophiles, and they present a utopian vision of the future based upon running everything on IT. On the other side of the argument, you hear the technophobes. These are also, certain of them, are people who are involved in inventing and developing the technology. And they warn you about the dangers. They warn you about the dystopian effects of that technology. But the rule of thamus tells you, don't listen to what either of those parties is saying, because they are less able to judge the effects and use of this technology than you are. You are the one who decides the future of this technology, one person at a time, one individual at a time, by the choices you make in your life regarding how you use it. And you don't have to listen to either the utopian or dystopian hype about it to make up your mind of how you choose to use it. By the way, while I'm on this jag, I would like to debunk something that has been said and has been treated as truth, as a brilliant revelation about mathematics, okay? So computer language, software language, is actually just a combinatorial process based in math. It's a hybrid between math and writing, the two arts introduced by Doth. And so you may have heard it said in a rather glorious fashion, mathematics is the language of nature. Nope, definitely not. Mathematics is definitely not the language of nature. I remember the first time I heard someone say that, one of these scientific pundits on the internet, and he went on to say how glorious it is that now that we are able to penetrate into the deep fabric of nature, that is the living wonder of the natural world of the planet, although he didn't say that, now that we're able to do that, lo and behold, what do we find? It's all written in computer code. No, it ain't. It is absolutely not written in computer code. Mathematics is not the language of nature. It is a language invented by human animals based on their observations of certain natural processes in order to track and compute those processes. But what humans invent to track and compute the processes of nature and so-called laws of nature are not the laws of nature. Mother Nature does not need mathematics to form the shell of a turtle or tortoise. She does not need mathematics to manifest the golden section and the logarithmic spiral in hundreds of different examples of nature, such as the distribution of the seeds in the head of a sunflower, the curl of the antlers on an elk or a deer. She doesn't use math to do that. Humans invented math in order to follow the way she does that, you see. So I wanted to make that point because it's been bugging me for many years, and I really get angry when people make glorified statements like that, scientific pundits, and they go out and they become memes and they become propositions accepted uncritically by the masses and even by a lot of intelligent people. It sounds very wonderful to say that. Mathematics is the language of nature. But it's not fucking true. So I'll conclude on that point. But I will stress, once again, that to recover from the hype and the false mystique of this archontic technology, it's your responsibility to decide how it will be used. Your responsibility in recovery to set the boundaries on how to use it. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty that kills.